When last we left our heroes, they enter the Forbidden City. They sprint through the streets of a forgotten metropolis, a jewel in an old empire. The streets smell of fungus and old leaves. What used to be a crown jewel is now a rotted corpse. There is destruction everywhere. The streets themselves, which used to be beautiful cobblestone, now have trees growing right through them. The city's large buildings and infrastructure are now just homes for various birds and wild animals. The small factions that call themselves, that kind of accumulate in this area, are barely worth the time mentioning. We will get to them in time. Our heroes find all of their party. They find their 5 NPCs and they find each other in this mess. But they seem to have lost a single member, the slave that they had released. There's 2 of them. Vessel's still with them, but their friend who had lost their mind is now gone, missing somewhere in this massive and rather dank city. They break down a door to an abandoned warehouse and decide to set up shop. It's a small warehouse, probably 30 by 20 feet, but enough that they can set up a place of safety for themselves and finally get full night rests while doing operations within the city. They leave their 5 NPCs there, partially for the DM, me, to have a easier time running, but also so that these guys can secure a perimeter, and they left them with a bit of money so that they can send one guy out at a time to the markets and pick up and make this little area kind of more livable. Our heroes decide to leave to the north, and passing a large gated community, which seems very well put together, and a ziggurat, which looks rather run down, they continue north and they start smelling a strong ammonia smell. Realizing very quickly that this is some kind of warning signal, our heroes continue north with reasonable awareness. Unfortunately, they are beset upon by a mugger who is holding a knife and seems to look like a mix between a hyena and a person. They back down immediately, and Vessel decides to use violence, because that's how Vessel is. Vessel shoots 2 fire bolts and nearly kills this creature in one hit. And the creature calls for some friends, and hundreds of these creatures come pouring out of the woodwork. They seem to be pack animals, and they put this one forward to as a bait for the trap. Our heroes, being our heroes, give up their weapons, because very few of them actually use weapons, and decide to follow along with their current enemies. And they are brought to what can, I guess, best be described to as a town within a town, kind of a shanty town. These creatures seem to be very low on the totem pole. These are one of the 7 factions in the city, and it seems to be one of the lowest of the factions. They are brought before the chief, and Ritsu, knowing the language pretty well, challenges the chief to combat. The chief is a large and grizzled hyena with kind of a silver furred back. And the 2 of them do battle. Now, our heroes, very fortunately, are using distraction methods and various other methods to mess with this combat. Some of them are also placing bets, because that's how Ritsu and Harvey be. After a brief skirmish, I guess it wasn't that brief, it's about, a minute and a half long skirmish, Ritsu finally comes out on top and puts this big guy down. He hits the ground and dies on impact, Ritsu's fists being too much for him to deal with. After a brief look around the room, the other hyenas are like, "Oh, I guess Ritsu's the new boss. You out with the old boss, in with the new." And they start singing the praises of their new leader. And they say, "Well, you have to be christened, and you have to go before our leader, the true leader." And our heroes are a little put off by this, but do what you got to do. So they go before what is called a lament. Now, laments in the Crawlish world, because remember, I run D&D in the Crawlish world, I don't run Crawlish world D&D. A lament is an angel. They are literally the gods of this planet's sadness over what has happened to this world. And they are pushed into this building, and immediately Vessel begins to act quite strangely, but the creature in question is an angelic being. They are beautiful, they are wise, they are kind. They look like a human woman in this particular case, and they are wrapped in like cloth and clothing, but the clothing itself looks like it has grown like a tree. It looks like it is even the building she lives in looks like it has grown, and the just like the beams of the building look like they're twisting towards heaven. Laments sing the songs of creation, and everything near them begins to grow in adoration of the heavens. So Vessel immediately has the quiet pulled out of him. This quiet is a creature or saint of some kind that lives within a realm that cannot be near a lament. Laments are pure goodness, and evil will not be tolerated within their presence. So Vessel wakes up for the first time in what feels like generations. He doesn't know what's going on. And for a brief moment, I give him an opportunity, because, DMs should always challenge the players to forsake the quiet and run from the quiet and become a vessel of a lament, which I'm very glad he refused, because that's going to be a lot more fun. They put someone else in charge of this little base. The person that they put in charge is a red-furred hyena who they thought seems very, first off, they didn't roll very high on the perception check, but at the end of the day, he stood out. He stood out as some kind of an Aragorn type, right? Like had the confidence of a character who very often has sat in the back. So, after beating all these guys up and letting the spirit of the dead chief move on, they leave and start heading back south. Our heroes then begin walking down the street, and it's getting a little late in the evening. We're talking now about 9 o'clock in the evening, and it's starting to get dark, but it's not quite dark yet, and it's the summertime, so, it doesn't get dark quick. And they see from within the gated community, see a massive burst of flame. And they're like, "Excuse me? What was that about?" And they don't really have an answer, and I'm not going to give them one. And they think right away, we got to figure that out. We got to find out what that was. And they look for a forest or something so they can look over the gated community. And fortunately, there is one. And they go up to it and they're like, "Oh, sweet. Let's do this." And they walk over. They're like, "Yeah." And right away, they realize, oh, this is the mountain crawls hangout. So there's it's not just a small bushel of trees. It's like a reasonably sized park. There's probably 10, 15 trees there. And most of them are small, but all the biggest ones, the ones that you can actually see over the wall with, those ones are full of mountain crawls, and all of them are rather insistent upon being respected. Fortunately, they sent Yama in first. Yama climbed up the tree and realized, oh, there's a lot of guys up here, and climbed right back down, and told the group, yeah, We're not going up there anytime soon. Moving on. They begin walking towards the north, and Vessel, who was at the back of the group at this point, is grabbed and pulled away. And our heroes don't know where he went. Fortunately, after a few seconds, some of them realize, hey, wait, Vessel's gone. And there's a brief skirmish with some more hyena men. This kind of was to establish that the hyena men aren't all aligned. They are chaotic in nature, and just because the survival of the biggest and the baddest is there doesn't mean that all of them are going to pay attention to that. So there's a brief skirmish. They wipe these guys out, find a little bit of fun and interesting gear, and then they move on. Fortunately, also Harvey does massive damage. I didn't really realize this about emissaries / warlocks. They do crazy damage. Like, he's probably our heaviest damage dealer. Like, I know that Eldritch Blast is good, but Eldritch Blast is really, really good. So, also Ritsu stomped a man to death, which was also pretty funny. So they begin forward, and okay, brief side story. They pulled Mr. Vessel aside, and they pushed him up against the wall, right? Like, so this is when he's getting mugged, and they put a knife to his throat and say, "Give me all your money." But Vessel doesn't have money. Vessel doesn't need it. He doesn't think money's important. So he's like, "I don't have any money on me. Like, I've got like 4 copper pieces." And they're like, "That's like, give us something." And he's like, "Well, I can tell you your fortune." And they're like, "Okay, what are the winning lottery numbers?" Because all these guys play a form of lottery. And he's like, "The winning lottery numbers are," and I had him roll on the like kind of the divination table, I guess, like, you know, like where you have to roll a D100 and roll under your level. And he's level 4. He rolled a 1. So he did it. He knew the winning lottery numbers. He had a flash of inspiration, and the Quiet told him the Quiet didn't tell him anything, because the Quiet doesn't talk. Surprise, surprise, that's its name. But he saw the winning lottery numbers. He saw into the future briefly. And these guys were like, "Oh, sweet." And then they're like, "Oh, we're going to kill you now." And then that's when our heroes, Harvey and the right, came around the corner. And then, sweet, there's a big fight. And then Harvey searches their bodies, and one of them had the winning lottery numbers on them. Now, I had them roll 3d10, and I more or less said, if you get 2 of the winning lottery numbers on those 3d10, then I'll give it to you, because that's more fun than anything else. And Harvey rolled like an 8 and a 5, and the number was 858. And I was like, can't get closer than that. That's dope. So they have the winning lottery ticket. They don't know how much money that is. They don't know where to even put it in. They don't know anything, but they have the winning lottery ticket, which I think is going to be hilarious. Our heroes then decide to head back home. It's getting very dark outside, and it's getting a little sketchy to be out. They walk by that forest again, and they notice that there's people in like watching them. And they're like, okay, that forest, probably a problem for another time. They walk by, and while they're almost home, they're just like one street away, they walk by 2 bugbear, but actually werebear officers guarding the gated community. And then they run into an officer of the Serrato Abyss. And they're like, "Howdy, officer. How's it going?" And he's like, "Oh, why are you guys here? You guys shouldn't be in this end of town." And, you know, when anybody talks except for Ritsu, he slaps them because he's an officer, and that's how they be. And Ritsu's like, "We're just heading back to base." He's like, "Base is the other way. Where are you going? Like, this is not where you should be." And he quickly realizes these aren't his guys. These are something else. And he's about to blow his whistle when our group dogpiles him. They just beat the tar out of him. And they're just about 100 feet from these 2 werebears. But fortunately, using a control flame, Vessel put the fire out around them. So there's no lit lanterns. And remember, this is a pretty dusty, dirty city with a lot of scuffles. And these werebears aren't going to just leave their command posts to run off into the dark and get mugged. So they're kind of a little hesitant. But if they had heard that whistle blast, then they would know who it was getting mugged, and they would, it would have been bad. So they beat the tar out of this guy and murk him. And they're like, crap, we just murked a guy. And then one of the werebear guys is like, wait a minute, something's not right here. And he's going to go take a look, and the other guy's going to kind of watch him walk into the darkness. And our heroes have a dead body that they have to deal with. Fortunately, Harvey grabs the body and shoves it into his convenient bag of holding thing that he's got. It's kind of a gourd thing that it's part of his emissary thing. So he pops it in and he's like, we're out of here. And they just start running. They prejudicitation up all the blood so that it's completely clean. They completely clean the site and they run off. While Vessel runs the other way. Now, Vessel runs the other way and tries to find some of the throwing spears that were used earlier in one of their previous engagement with some mountain crawls. He finds one, and he runs back. And they all make it back to the smoke shack and take a full night's rest. And that's where our session ended. So, I have a map here. Right in the middle there, right here, is where our heroes currently are, right up on top of those mountains. Let's see if I can get a decent shot there. Right there. You can see a few little other things around here that they've mapped out over the last little bit, but that's where they are. And this is going to be a really interesting coming few sessions because they now have a lot more information, but I think it's going to get pretty nasty. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of lore because I figure I don't do that enough. So this is just going to be a brief 2-minute lore dump on the Hachi clan, the guys that our guys work for. Hachi clan are from the continent of Yule. Yule is the primary continent of the Nigan Phi Empire, which is a completely separate thing from where we are currently. And just recently, the Nigan Phi Empire has deemed it safe enough for us to do for the clans to do shipping on the open sea. For a very long time, the open sea was way too treacherous, but it just recently calmed down, and they were like, "Oh wait, we got the ships. Let's do it." And they've begun sending out these different missions out to various places. Now, the Hachi clan is a vassal of the Zakefu clan. The Zakefu clan is one of the largest players on the continent of Yule. Zakefu has the most vassals of any clan. They believe in vassal states. They believe in specialization of tasks. So Zakefu was more than willing to send Hachi clan out overseas as its navy and colonizing arm. So that's kind of what the Hachi clan is. This area that they currently are is much denser jungle. And back up on the continent of Yule, all the animals are hostile. All of them. With the exception of 2 or 3 bird species, all animals are remarkably hostile. You deal with it, you walk into the bush, a squirrel will try to bite your face. Now, most animals aren't a big deal because they're crawls, and crawls are pretty hardy, but the further north you go on this planet, the more dangerous animals are. So when they got to this island area, and there were rideable birds and birds that you could do different tasks with, like giant moa birds and the like, they were like, whoa, wait a minute. We can actually do we can really change warfare and supply lines with the animals from this area. And so one of the biggest imports that Hachi clan is bringing back are trainable birds, trainable or tea. There's better tea, more varieties of tea, and more most tea comes from this area. And just in the small area that the Hachi clan has conquered, just the small ring of fortress bases that they've got, which you kind of see on this map. There's a little ring of circles right around here. You can kind of see them surrounding this little island. There's a ring of circles there. Just that small area supplies roughly 85% of all tea on the Kralish mainland. So clearly there's a lot of money to be made here. So that's kind of the basics on the Hachi clan. They are the they're the navy and the colonizing arm of the Zeikfu clan. And they are here at behest of the Naginfei Empire as a tea and conquering colonizing force. They are also in league with the Ewan and Two Sons Tea Company, which is the largest tea company back on the homeland. And those guys are those guys are the ones that are actually doing the tea processing and all that stuff. Like you don't want soldiers doing your tea processing. That's not what they're good at. They're good at killing people and making sure that your stuff is safe. So that kind of gives you an idea of the power politics here. So the Zeikfu clan's the boss. Hachi clan is their military arm. Ewan and Two Sons is the actual money making venture. So if any of those sides are angry at each other, it's going to be really bad. Back over to the other side, we have the various tribes of these islands. The tribes of these islands are the Cerrado Abyss, which is the Seven Hells. And the Seven Hells are the ruling, they're the Aztecs, I guess, but like not nearly as advanced or awesome as the Aztecs. These guys are pretty low end as far as actual stuff is concerned. They are the ruling class right now. They rule over the mountain crawls, a few creatures, the werebears, and these mongrel-esque men, and they also rule over the river crawls, which were the first crawls that we ran into when we were back at the river scene. And there's another group of crawls on this island called the Savak. Now, the Savak are the least known of all these groups. Savak translates to saw crawl, and vessel is a Savak. There is also the beach crawls, but beach crawls are they allied themselves directly to the Hachi clan. They're like, you know what? These guys can offer us a better, even though these guys are kind of buttheads and they're trying to conquer our land, these guys are offering a better form of life, and we don't want to get bullied by the Cerrado Abyss anymore. And our hero Vorn, the druid, he is a beach crawl. So, in summary, Harvey, it works for Ewan and Two Sons Tea Company, and he is here to harvest tea. Yama is a Shakai, which is not mentioned in my previous shtick, but more or less just another clan, but they work with Hachi clan, so is a Hachi clan soldier for all intents and purposes. Ritsu is a Hachi clan commanding officer. They're a lieutenant, kind of lieutenant-ish. Like, crawls don't really have that symbol. You get it. They're a lieutenant. They're a first-rank officer. They were brought up through they were brought from sergeant to lieutenant, which is rare, but here we go. And they are they're a soldier of the Hachi clan. Vessel is a Savak, a saw crawl, who is not, remember, the saw crawls don't owe allegiance to anyone. And lastly, Vorn is a beach crawl who are allied with the Hachi clan to begin with. There you go, guys. There's a bit of a brief lore dump. Sorry, I know it's right at the very end. I said it was 2 minutes. It was 5, 6. Have yourselves an excellent day. Next time in Yule, and take her easy, guys. Thank you, and boop.